Imagine a device so cruel that it could strip away not just your voice, but your very sense of self. During the colonial era, enslaved Africans faced horrors beyond imagination, and among the most sinister tools of oppression was the metal mask, also called the iron muzzle, originally designed to restrain dangerous animals. This device was twisted into a method of controlling human beings, silencing them, starving them, and breaking their spirits. These masks were more than just instruments of punishment. They were symbols of total domination. Slaves were forced to wear them to prevent eating the fruits of their labor, to stop them from singing spiritual songs that nurtured hope, and to erase the languages that connected them to their heritage. Every metal clamp and strap was a calculated effort to strip away identity, leaving behind only obedience and despair. Picture a young man, uprooted from his homeland, shackled and brought across the Atlantic, only to have a cold piece of iron clamp his mouth shut. The act of speaking, of calling out his name, of sharing a song of hope or resistance, was forbidden. Every bite of food denied, every song silenced, every word erased was an assault on the human soul. The metal mask turned laborers into shadows of themselves, forcing them into a world of pain and submission. But even in this darkness, stories of resilience shine through. Individuals like Kunta Kinte and Frederick Douglass endured these unimaginable hardships, refusing to let the metal mask erase their identity. Their courage reminds us that even under extreme oppression, the human spirit can persevere, resist, and survive. These stories are not just history, they are lessons in strength, endurance, and the unyielding desire for freedom. As we explore the terrifying history of the metal mask, it is crucial to remember the faces behind the suffering, the voices that were silenced, and the resilience that could not be broken. By learning about these atrocities, we honor those who endured them and gain a deeper understanding of the human capacity for courage under unimaginable circumstances. If you find this story as compelling and important as we do not forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more history that moves, informs, and inspires. Every view, every comment, and every subscription helps keep these vital stories alive. History is not just about dates and events, it is about people, their struggles, and the lessons we carry forward. Join us on this journey as we uncover the chilling realities of slavery, the horror of the metal mask, and the enduring spirit of those who refused to be silenced. The metal mask was not merely a physical restraint. It was a calculated instrument designed to erase the very essence of a person, to transform vibrant, living individuals into shadows of obedience. Imagine the weight of cold iron pressed relentlessly against the face, the unforgiving grip clamping the jaw, restricting every movement of the mouth. Every word, every whisper of protest or hope, to where it was to be forced into silence. But the cruelty extended far beyond the mere prevention of speech. Slaves who toiled under the relentless sun in sprawling fields were already deprived of comfort and nourishment. Yet the mask added a layer of deprivation that was both deliberate and psychologically devastating. Fruits that grew under their careful labor, apples glistening in the sun, bananas ripening on their stalks, sugar cane swaying in the breeze, became forbidden treasures, each bite denied by the unyielding metal covering their mouths. The hunger it imposed was not incidental. It was a methodical tactic to weaken bodies, but also to break spirits, to convince those who suffered that resistance was futile, that even the simplest joys of life could be taken away at the whim of another. Yet, the metal mask was also a silencer of culture, a device aimed at erasing memory and connection. Spiritual songs, which had long been a source of solace, of solidarity, of resistance, were forcibly stilled. These songs carried history, carried the voices of ancestors, carried the dreams of freedom, and to suppress them was to attempt to sever the invisible bonds that linked generations together, to sever the roots that nourished identity and hope. When a slave was silenced, the music of their heritage, the echoes of their past, were momentarily extinguished, leaving a hollow space where only fear and compliance remained. Likewise, the ability to teach and communicate in native languages was intentionally taken away. Parents were forbidden to speak to their children in the dialects of their homeland, the words that carried wisdom, tradition, and a sense of belonging were erased, replaced by the language of the oppressors. Each syllable denied was a step further into alienation, a calculated effort to reshape a person's mind and identity, to make them feel detached from themselves and their history, isolated not just from the wider world but from the very essence of who they were. The punishments associated with the metal mask were extreme, designed to leave both visible and invisible scars. Starvation became a cruel instrument of control, where the mask ensured that only at the discretion of the enslaver could the wearer receive the smallest morsel of sustenance. Sometimes, a piece of fruit was forced into the mouth before the mask was fastened. The metal clamped over it, trapping both food and pain together in a daily torment that eroded both health and hope. The psychological strain of knowing that survival depended entirely on another swim weighed as heavily as the iron itself, and the physical agony of pressure on jaws and skin left permanent reminders of subjugation. There were those who endured weeks, months, and even years under this relentless oppression, their voices silenced, their expressions hidden, their individuality suppressed. Each day of confinement under the metal mask was a test of endurance, and the resilience required to survive such conditions was extraordinary. Though often invisible to the world outside the prison of the fields or the plantation, even in the midst of such darkness, moments of resistance and persistence flickered like embers refusing to die. Slaves who wore the masks carried with them a mental defiance that the physical device could never entirely suppress. Within the heart, the memory of a song, the recollection of a word from a native tongue, or the image of a loved one in the homeland endured, creating a quiet rebellion of thought and spirit. While outward communication was brutally restricted, inner life became a sanctuary, a secret space where identity and hope could be preserved, nurtured, and protected against the constant pressures of oppression. The mask could distort voices and limit action, but it could not fully extinguish the human capacity for imagination, memory, and the yearning for freedom, which sometimes fueled daring escapes or quiet acts of subtle defiance that undermined the system of control bit by bit. In examining the history of the metal mask, it becomes evident that it was more than a tool of punishment. It was a multifaceted weapon of oppression, designed to control not just the body but the mind and soul. By preventing eating, silencing spiritual expression, and forbidding the transmission of cultural knowledge, the mask attempted to sever connections to identity, heritage, and community, leaving the wearer both physically weakened and emotionally isolated. Yet, within the horror of this device lies the testament of human resilience. The stories of those who endured it, who survived despite unimaginable suffering, who retained fragments of self and culture, speak to a profound strength and determination that no instrument of oppression could fully conquer. The metal mask, in all its cruelty, paradoxically highlights the enduring spirit of those who wore it, a silent witness to the capacity of human beings to resist, endure, and ultimately reclaim their voices against the forces that sought to strip them away. The metal mask, with its unyielding iron frame and merciless design, represented more than physical restraint. It was a calculated weapon aimed at the very soul of those who wore it, a tool meant to sever connections to identity, culture, and heritage. For the enslaved Africans who toiled endlessly under the unforgiving sun, the mask was both a literal and symbolic barrier, a physical device that transformed them into shadows of themselves while simultaneously attempting to erase the rich, legacy they carried within. In every strap, in every heavy clasp pressed against the jaw, there lay an intention not only to punish but to obliterate the memory of home, of family, and of the languages and rituals that had shaped their lives long before captivity. Every song they once sang to soothe the heart and fortify the spirit was silenced, their voices replaced by the oppressive quiet imposed by iron and chains, stripping the world of the cultural cadence that had once defined them. In this way, the mask became a mechanism not merely of control, but of cultural erasure, a grim attempt to detach enslaved people from the rhythms of their own existence and to reframe their identity entirely within the narrow confines dictated by those who held power over them. The act of silencing went far beyond stopping a song or preventing speech. It attacked the memory and consciousness of a people. Spiritual songs that had been passed down through generations carried with them history, faith, and the unspoken resilience of ancestors who had endured hardships and survived. These songs had been a source of unity, a shared language that tied the community together, and a quiet rebellion that affirmed life even under the most oppressive conditions. The mask sought to extinguish that inner music, to replace the harmonic threads of African life with a dissonance of fear and submission. Every time the jaws were clamped, every time the metal pressed into flesh, the act echoed a deliberate erasure of memory, a suppression not only of physical movement but of the narrative and voice of an entire people. The mask's impact on communication extended beyond individual suffering, severing the fragile bonds of community that might foster solidarity, resistance, or mutual support. In cutting off the ability to speak freely, to share knowledge, to mentor the next generation, the mask was a calculated strike against the continuity of cultural identity itself. Language, in particular, became a battlefield. The enslaved were prevented from teaching their children the dialects of their homelands, cutting off the linguistic thread that connected one generation to the next. Words that carried wisdom, history, and stories were silenced, leaving a vacuum where knowledge and identity should have lived. The loss was profound because language was more than communication. It was the repository of culture, the living thread that bound individuals to their ancestry and to each other. By denying this fundamental right, the mask forced a rupture between the past and the present, leaving the enslaved isolated not only from their physical surroundings but from the very essence of who they were. The metal mask, thus, became an invisible yet palpable oppressor of memory, a device designed to replace heritage with imposed compliance and personal identity with forced anonymity. Yet, even in the shadow of such calculated oppression, resilience persisted. Those who wore the mask carried fragments of themselves within, hidden from the eyes of their captors, yet alive in thought and memory. The mind became a sanctuary, a space where culture, language, and personal identity could survive the weight of iron and chains. While the mask controlled the body and muffled the voice, it could not fully erase the memories, beliefs, or inner life of the enslaved. Individuals learned to communicate through subtle gestures, to preserve stories in silence, and to pass wisdom covertly, demonstrating that the human spirit could adapt and endure even under conditions explicitly designed to annihilate it. The mask, while a symbol of domination, inadvertently highlighted the strength of those subjected to it, because their ability to retain identity, to remember heritage, and to resist erasure from within became a testament to resilience against overwhelming cruelty. The narrative of the metal mask is thus intertwined with the broader story of slavery, where control extended beyond labor and punishment to the very soul of the enslaved. It reminds us that oppression is not limited to physical suffering, but often seeks to annihilate memory, culture, and dignity, replacing them with silence and subjugation. Every figure who endured the mask, whether a young man pulled from his homeland, a child forbidden to speak to their parents, or a community prevented from sharing its songs carries a story of resistance embedded in the very act of survival. In remembering these experiences, we not only honor those who endured unimaginable hardship, but also recognize the profound resilience of human identity, which, even under relentless attempts at erasure, persisted. The metal mask, with all its cruelty, ultimately becomes a mirror reflecting the tension between oppression and the indomitable will to preserve selfhood, a dark symbol that paradoxically illuminates the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Even centuries later, the echoes of this silencing resonate, reminding us that history is not merely a catalogue of events but a living testament to endurance, memory, and the struggle to maintain identity in the face of systematic attempts to destroy it. The metal mask was a cruel instrument of suffering whose impact extended far beyond the silence it imposed, leaving indelible marks on the bodies and minds of those forced to wear it. To imagine its weight is to imagine a relentless, iron grip pressing against flesh and bone, holding the jaws rigid, making even the simplest act of speaking, eating, or breathing a torment. Those who endured it quickly learned that the pain was not momentary but persistent, a constant companion that reminded them of their vulnerability and the power of their captors. Skin would break under the pressure, raw and bleeding from the tight straps and unyielding metal, and every movement caused agony. Even as the body weakened from wounds and malnutrition, the mask left no respite. Food, already scarce and controlled by the enslaver, became nearly impossible to consume, and every bite taken under the oppressive weight of iron was a battle between the instinct for survival and the mechanical cruelty designed to suppress it. The deliberate deprivation of sustenance compounded the suffering, leaving individuals physically diminished, weakened, and often unable to endure the most basic functions of life without pain, their bodies betraying them under the relentless strain of confinement. Yet the suffering was not solely physical. The psychological torment inflicted by the mask was equally devastating. Isolation was a central part of its design, for silence could only be maintained if the individual was cut off from others, deprived of companionship and support. The inability to communicate, to share thoughts or plead for relief, created a profound loneliness that gnawed at the mind. Days and weeks of enforced muteness distorted reality, leaving the wearer trapped in a world where every sound, every interaction, and every gesture was mediated by fear and pain. In such conditions, the mind became a battlefield. The relentless pressure, combined with deprivation and sensory limitation, sometimes drove individuals to hallucinate or lose touch with time and space, as the iron mask imposed a reality defined entirely by suffering. For some, the anguish was so complete that it fractured the mind, leaving permanent scars or precipitating a slow descent into insanity. Every moment under the mask became a test of endurance, a struggle to retain a sense of self when the body, the voice, and even the simplest means of survival were under siege. The trauma endured was further compounded by the inescapable reality that resistance brought further punishment. Those who attempted to remove the mask, to speak, or to consume food illicitly were met with harsher measures, reinforcing the absolute control of the enslaver. The metal mask became a tool of psychological dominance as well as physical restraint, a reminder that autonomy, choice, and dignity had been stripped away. The impact extended beyond those moments of pain. The memory of the mask, the lingering echoes of its pressure and isolation, persisted long after its removal. Survivors often carried the consequences for life-scarred flesh, damaged vocal cord, a heightened sense of caution, and an enduring awareness of the fragility of freedom under oppression. Yet even within this terror, the human spirit demonstrated remarkable resilience. Some found ways to communicate silently, to preserve memories of home, and to maintain a private sense of identity that the mask could not fully erase. The mask was intended to annihilate autonomy, but it could not fully extinguish hope, nor could it completely suppress the inner life of those who endured it. Historical accounts reveal the profound cost of the mask in ways that transcend statistics or generalized suffering. Kunta Kinte's unbroken will, despite months under the iron muzzle, speaks to the tension between imposed terror and internal defiance. Frederick Douglass's experiences demonstrate the capacity for mental fortitude in the face of extreme bodily constraint, highlighting the combination of pain, isolation, and deliberate malnutrition that accompanied the device. Ota Benga's ordeal, though in a different context, underscores the intersection of physical suffering and psychological trauma, illustrating how confinement and enforced silence can distort perception, crush dignity, and leave lasting scars on the mind. William Thomas and Gabriel Prosser's experiences reflect how the mask was employed as a weapon, not just against bodies but against resistance itself, imposing a level of suffering meant to break both spirit and will. The mask inflicted injuries that could take months to heal, and often its victims emerged changed, cautious, and deeply aware of the fragility of their autonomy. Yet, despite the brutality, these accounts also reveal remarkable endurance and survival. The human capacity to preserve selfhood, memory, and hope even under the most extreme conditions emerges as a central theme. Survivors of the metal mask carried within them an inner defiance that allowed them to retain fragments of identity, to sustain memories of culture, language, and song, and to emerge into freedom with an enduring recognition of both the horrors they had endured and the strength required to survive them. The metal mask, in all its merciless design, thus becomes both a symbol of unimaginable cruelty and a testament to human resilience. It reminds us that even in the darkest circumstances, the mind can create space for defiance, for identity, and for the preservation of dignity, asserting the irrepressible spirit of those subjected to systematic oppression. In the story of the metal mask, suffering and survival are inseparably entwined, revealing the complex interplay between imposed pain, enduring trauma, and the unbreakable core of human strength. Among the countless souls who endured the horrors of the metal mask, a few names stand out, their stories preserved in history as both testament and warning, their experiences illustrating the unyielding strength of human resilience even under the most brutal circumstances. Kunta Kinte, perhaps one of the most widely known figures through the story immortalized in Roots, endured unspeakable suffering after being torn from his homeland in Gambia and thrust into the harsh realities of American slavery. His refusal to accept the slave name imposed upon him by his master marked him as defiant, and that defiance came at a devastating cost. The metal mask became a physical manifestation of the oppression he faced, clamping over his mouth, restricting his speech, and silencing the voice that had once been free to call out in his native tongue. Days and months under this iron device left his mouth bloodied, his identity challenged at every turn. Yet Kunta Kinte's inner spirit, the core of his selfhood, remained unbroken, an ember of resistance flickering quietly beneath the weight of enforced silence. Even after enduring this torment, his story is one of endurance and determination, culminating in his eventual escape and relentless pursuit of freedom, a triumph born out of the very resilience the mask was designed to destroy. Frederick Douglass, another emblematic figure, encountered the metal mask in a different time and context, yet the cruelty was no less severe. Born into slavery in Maryland, Douglass was separated from his mother at a young age and subjected to relentless beatings. But his hunger for knowledge became a quiet rebellion. Learning to read and write in secret, he displayed a courage that threatened the system designed to keep him compliant. When discovered, he was delivered to Edward Covey, a man notorious for his harsh treatment of slaves, where the iron muzzle was imposed upon him as punishment and control. The mask, piercing his flesh and confining his jaws, silenced his protest and subjected him to days of excruciating pain. Every breath was laborious, every morsel of food a torment. And yet, in the depths of this suffering, Douglass cultivated an inner defiance, a quiet fortitude that would later fuel his escape and his rise as a prominent abolitionist and voice for justice. The contrast between the mask's attempt to erase his voice and Douglass' eventual eloquence underscores the indomitable spirit that survived even the most oppressive conditions. Ota Benga's ordeal, though occurring in the early 20th century, illustrates the continuing cruelty of dehumanization and the ways in which oppression can take on new forms. A member of the Beauty Pygmies from the Congo, Benga was captured and brought to the United States, where he was placed on display in a human zoo and forced to wear a metal mask that silenced his voice and prevented normal eating and drinking. His situation compounded the physical pain of restraint with psychological trauma, leaving him isolated, dehumanized, and unable to fully communicate. Despite being removed from the iron mask, the scars of this confinement lingered, and Benga's struggle to reconcile his identity in an alien and hostile environment ultimately led to his tragic suicide. His story illuminates the lasting consequences of forced silencing and cultural erasure, revealing how the scars of such oppression can transcend immediate physical suffering, persisting as emotional and psychological torment. The stories of William Thomas and Gabriel Prosser further reveal the range of experiences under the shadow of the metal mask, highlighting not just survival but also resistance in the face of extreme cruelty. William Thomas, subjected to repeated punishment with increasingly elaborate and painful masks, endured isolation, starvation, and violence that would have broken many. Yet he sought moments of escape and resistance, asserting his humanity even under unbearable conditions. Gabriel Prosser, a skilled blacksmith and visionary inspired by ideals of freedom, planned a rebellion against slaveholders in Virginia, gathering hundreds in preparation for an uprising. His capture led to the imposition of the metal mask alongside whippings and public humiliation, a combination of physical and psychological torment meant to serve as a warning to others. Prosser's story, tragically cut short, exemplifies both the courage to resist and the brutal consequences faced by those who dared to challenge the oppressive system. Together, these individual narratives illuminate the varied and complex dimensions of suffering imposed by the metal mask, while also highlighting the extraordinary endurance of those who faced it. Each story, though unique, shares common threads: the attempt to strip identity and autonomy, the imposition of severe physical pain, the isolation and psychological torment, and the unrelenting desire to survive and assert selfhood against all odds. From the forced silence of Kunta Kinte to Frederick Douglass' intellectual defiance, from Ota Benga's cultural displacement to Thomas and Prosser's struggles against both physical and systemic oppression, the lives of these individuals collectively narrate a history of resistance, resilience, and the tragic consequences of cruelty. The metal mask, in these stories, is not simply a relic of the past, but a symbol of the extreme lengths to which systems of oppression will go to control and dehumanize. Yet it also stands as a testament to the endurance of human spirit and identity, revealing that even when the body is confined, silenced, or punished, the inner self can preserve memory, culture, and hope. The legacy of Kunta Kinte. Frederick Douglass, Ota Benga, William Thomas, and Gabriel Prosser is a powerful reminder that history remembers both the suffering inflicted and the courage required to endure it. That oppression may impose profound pain, but cannot wholly extinguish the resilience and agency of those who resist, survive, and, in some cases, triumph against unimaginable odds. Their stories converge into a narrative that is both cautionary and inspiring, offering lessons about the capacity for human endurance, the importance of cultural memory, and the unbreakable will to maintain dignity and identity even in the darkest circumstances. As we reflect on the harrowing history of the metal mask, it becomes clear that this cruel device was far more than a mere instrument of physical restraint. It was a symbol of the extreme lengths to which slavery sought to strip human beings of their dignity, identity, and autonomy. The iron-clamped jaws, the unyielding weight, and the silenced voices all stand as stark reminders of the deliberate and systematic cruelty inflicted upon those enslaved, an attempt to erase not only their freedom but their very sense of self. Yet, within these stories of suffering, there emerges a remarkable narrative of resilience and endurance, of the human spirit's ability to survive, adapt, and, in some cases, triumph against unimaginable odds, from the steadfast defiance of Kunta Kinte, who refused to surrender his name and heritage despite the iron muzzle clamped upon his face, to Frederick Douglass, whose intellect and unbroken resolve carried him from enslavement to global advocacy. The individuals who endured these masks embody courage in its most profound form. Their lives remind us that even under the heaviest oppression, the human spirit can resist being fully broken. Preserving memory, identity, and hope against the dark weight of tyranny. Ota Benga's tragic story, though situated in a different context, echoes the same themes of dehumanization and psychological torment, showing how systemic oppression can continue to leave scars long after the physical instruments of control have been removed. William Thomas and Gabriel Prosser, too, reveal the complex interplay of suffering, resistance, and the unyielding desire for freedom. Their lives are testament to both the cost of rebellion and the enduring strength required to endure cruelty. Collectively, these narratives illustrate that the metal mask was not simply a punishment of the body but an assault on the mind, culture, and very essence of the person subjected to it. Yet in their survival, they demonstrate that identity and dignity, though threatened, could not be completely extinguished. Their resilience serves as a guiding example, showing how courage, memory, and hope can persist even when circumstances are designed to annihilate them. Remembering these stories is crucial because they are not isolated events but part of a larger historical pattern of oppression and resistance. The metal mask reminds us that systems of power have often sought to silence and erase, but also that human endurance can subvert those attempts in ways both visible and subtle. By understanding the depth of suffering endured and the resilience displayed, we gain insight not only into history but into the principles of justice, empathy, and equality that continue to guide our present and future. Honoring the memory of those who suffered under the metal mask is therefore an act of education and moral responsibility, reinforcing the importance of human dignity and the imperative to fight against oppression in all its forms. Each story teaches us that the scars of the past must inform our commitment to creating societies where every individual is recognized, valued, and protected. The lessons of the metal mask extend beyond the historical context of slavery into our contemporary understanding of injustice and human rights. They challenge us to recognize the ways in which oppression can manifest, to speak out against cruelty, and to ensure that the mechanisms of subjugation that once enslaved bodies and minds are never allowed to resurface. By remembering the pain, courage, and determination of those who endured the metal mask, we cultivate empathy, strengthen our commitment to equality, and reinforce the belief that every individual deserves the right to live with dignity, freedom, and self-expression. This is not only an acknowledgement of history, but a call to action, urging us to translate remembrance into tangible efforts that promote justice and respect for all. In closing, the metal mask stands as a haunting reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty, but also as a symbol of resilience, resistance, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. It compels us to confront uncomfortable truths about our past, to honor those who suffered, and to commit ourselves to a future where such acts of dehumanization are never repeated. As we reflect on the stories of Kunta Kinte, Frederick Douglass, Ota Benga, William Thomas, Gabriel Prosser, and countless others whose names may never be recorded, we are reminded that history is both a teacher and a warning, and that our actions today shape the world for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past, for bearing witness to these stories of pain and perseverance, and for committing yourself to remembering the lessons they offer. If this video resonated with you, please support our efforts to share history and promote understanding by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing it with your friends and family. By doing, you help ensure that the stories of those who endured unspeakable suffering are never forgotten, and that their courage continues to inspire the fight for equality, justice, and dignity for all. Together, through remembrance and action, we honor the past, illuminate the present, and build a future rooted in respect and compassion.